Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. This is Mujib Khazi, and you're watching Washington Roundtable. We have a very special segment today, and I'm joined by an esteemed scholar who I look up to very much when it comes down to learning about Islam and different tradition of Islam. I'm joined by none other than our beloved Sheikh Azhar Subedar Sahib. Thank you very much for being on the show. Jazakallah khair for your time.
Jazakallah khair for having me.
Thank you, Imam Sahib. I'm going to start off with some hard question. I know you're a brave man, you can take those questions. So my first question would be that when you talk about it, there's only one Islam that we know of, that's the Islam of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Why do Muslims talk about that there are four madahib in Islam? What does it mean?
So first and foremost, it's important in this day and age that we live in that Muslims who have these questions, which are valid questions, there's nothing against these questions, it's better to understand the framework behind them before we actually get to those questions themselves. It's the lack of understanding behind what leads up to these questions, which is constantly opening doors of new questions that weren't asked before. Yes, you are 100% correct. At the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was one Islam, there was one Prophet, there was one Quran. It was very simple. However, with the progression of time and the transmission of knowledge, and for people from different parts of the world to adopt that same religion without seeing it for themselves, questions arose. Now, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam practiced things in different ways. For example, just a few nights ago, we were reading a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, in the latter portion of his life, would pray sitting down, and then he would stand up and make ruku, as with age, and of course he gained a little weight. The point is that that would contradict his statement of standing and praying. In addition, for example, there is a sitting that some school of thoughts observe that happens between the second sajda and standing back up for the second or fourth rak'ah, whereas other school of thoughts would complete the sajda and stand straight back up. Well, when we look into the hadith, we find that there are both narrations. The scholars that molded the school of thoughts as we understand them is that they put the religion together in a way that we as lay people would be able to understand it and practice it with a sense of ease, not so that we divide. You see, there are differences in our religion as to what is more of a priority than the other. Do we sit and stand? Well, Rasulullah ﷺ did that, but at the end portion of his life, when he was a bit tired. But generally speaking, for the majority part of his life, he would stand straight back up. So the question then becomes, what is more preferable to do? It doesn't mean it's wrong. But sadly, these differences that were based on virtuous actions has now become a source of division. And that's where your question comes from, that why do we see today the Muslim Ummah dividing merely on the lines of my school of thought is better than yours? It's not that one school of thought is right and everyone else is wrong. It's about understanding what those scholars selected to be the most virtuous mode of practice, and the people who adhere to that follow that.
Beautifully answered.
I'm sorry, it's a long answer.
No, that's perfect. Actually, I want to understand that you have somewhat alluded to the portion that it leads to different segment of Muslim society into division, and that division have gone so far off that generally it happens is in most part of the countries, a follower of one school of thought doesn't even talk to the other school of thought. So that rift, that friction that it has caused, I would not say the interpretation of different school of thought has caused, but what do you think? What is the core reason for this rift and division amongst the four school of thoughts?
Again, it's a very broad question, and there's no one answer that can actually articulate what is truly happening. However, there are multiple things that are contributing towards this. The rise of ignorance, the rise of, I would call, compounded ignorance, where a person doesn't know, doesn't want to know, but feels that they know and isn't open to listening to anyone else who knows. That's one aspect. Number two, the culture wherein certain scholars and leaders promote their understanding of the religion as absolute, and that leads to a followership. And since that followership is appealing and admiring to them, they don't want to lose that. So the words that they select and use, and Allah knows intentions. I'm not here to question someone's intentions, but the words that they select and the way that they propagate their message ends up becoming that my scholar is right and everyone else is wrong. Then you hear the terms of kufr and people who are outside of Islam being thrown at one another in the Muslim community. In order to stop that and suppress that from continuing happening, it's important for the scholars to realize the ramifications of their words. You see, you can just say something, but you understand what these words can do. As much as a doctor is responsible to diagnose and then treat a patient, the doctor is, in my eyes, equally responsible to follow up with the patient, see how the treatment is going. As a scholar tells the people, they need to follow up. The Prophet Muhammad said in a hadith that the best creation tahta adim as-sama, under the sky, are the good scholars, and the worst creation under the sky are the bad scholars. And so the scholars, when they are put in a position where they can be on either side of the scale, we need to ensure that we are always trying to be good scholars and not bad scholars. How do I know I'm a good scholar? Where I'm not demonizing someone else who doesn't agree with my ideology, so long we're within the framework of Sharia. Praying with their 2 rak'ah and then one, and also praying with their 2 rak'ahs with one after that in the same time is part of our Sharia. It's not outside of it. These school of thoughts don't teach something which is outside of Islam. So beyond the ignorance and beyond the scholars, I think people need to also be very careful on how they become passionate about issues that aren't supposed to be issues to exert so much passion in. So that's 3 things I think that need to be addressed.
Thank you very much. Especially people who are growing up in subcontinent, we were giving this impression that you are asking too many questions. Don't ask these questions. Sometimes some of the answers that come from the scholars don't make sense. Or maybe I have failed to understand the response that was given by the scholars. Is asking too many questions from an imam or a scholar is a bad thing in Islam?
La haya fi din, the Prophet ﷺ said there's no shame in deen. So you ask the questions. Ask anything pertaining to any matter. Our religion is open to questions. We should question. But questioning for the sake of learning is important. Questioning for the sake of putting someone down is not right. So the intention behind our questioning should be to learn, and we should continue questioning. There's nothing wrong with questioning. And as we question and as we learn, we have to also believe in ourselves that we're evolving as Muslims. There's that mindset, I said, back home that people brought from their countries to this country, and they continue to incorporate that within their children. And the Quran highlights a prime example that people in the past use. Inna wajadna aba'ana. Our forefathers did this. Well, that is Allah telling us, do not be stuck in a time where people did what they did. Rather, your Islam teaches you to become a better human being and grow yourself in your practices, in your faith, in your understanding on a daily basis, and not to suffice on whatever you've learned or whatever you were taught, whatever environment you grew up in. So question, continue to learn, break out of this silo where it's just what I know and nothing more. And again, for those who say questioning is wrong, I beg to differ.
Part of the answer that comes from different scholars, first thing is that they get aggravated by the question. They get angry if you ask them the question. And second thing is that, hey, our faith is believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blindly. Don't ask question. If you ask question, you're basically going towards the nation of Musa alayhi salam. They had so many questions and they were destroyed. So that's the argument that we get in response. Quickly on that before I change the subject.
So for that, it's simple. A person is not a representative of the faith. The faith is a faith. People are people. What are those people and who are they and what their thoughts are? I don't know. Number 2 is alladhina yu'minuna bil ghaib. Those who believe in the unseen. We believe there is the unseen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the things that Allah has created, and our belief in the unseen should be more than what we see. The belief in Jannah, the belief in the Day of Judgment, the belief in the grave should be more solid in our minds than the belief of what we see. That does not denote that faith is blind and just follow and don't ask questions. This is kind of wrong. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Lastly on this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so beautifully articulates in the Quran questions that were asked by people by also posing the question and then the answer. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ. They ask you about gambling and intoxicant. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ. They ask you about the women's menses. Allah could have just wrote the answer or told the answer, but He told the question also. Why? This demonstrates that asking question was also liked by Allah, that He provided an opportunity for the ummah to gain clarity. So keep on asking questions.
Jazakallah khair, and these are some profound responses that our young generation is waiting for those answers. I would like to have a second episode with Imam Sahib about the structure of our organization and how the Muslims are dealing with it. For right now, that's all we have from the studio. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.